Chapter 1. Shadows of the BSD. Adriana Moretti stepped off the train and breathed in the crisp evening air of the city that was supposed to be her fresh start. The streets hummed with life, lights reflecting off puddles from a recent rain. Every sound and shadow felt sharper, more alive than she remembered from her hometown. She hugged her coat tighter around her, a small comfort against the unfamiliarity that pressed in from all sides. She had left behind everything familiar, determined to carve a life where her choices belonged only to her. The weight of past mistakes and quiet regrets still lingered in her chest, but she refused to let them define her here. As she walked toward the taxi stand, her eyes scanned the crowd, noting faces both weary and indifferent. And then she saw him, Matteo Romano, and against a black car parked under the flickering streetlight. Even from a distance, Adriana felt a pull she could not explain. His presence was magnetic and dangerous, a storm contained in human form. Broad shoulders, a sharp jawline, and eyes that seemed to measure the world with an unyielding intensity. He looked like someone who did not tolerate weakness and who demanded loyalty in every unspoken way. Their eyes met, and Adriana felt the temperature shift around her. It was as if the air itself had thickened, charged with something electric and unspoken. Matteo did not smile, but there was a flicker of recognition, a faint acknowledgement that she had noticed him as much as he had noticed her. Her pulse quickened, but she turned away, convincing herself it was nothing more than a passing moment. The city had a rhythm of its own, a pulse that seemed to echo the secrets it held. Adriana navigated the streets toward the apartment she had rented, each step accompanied by the faint sensation that she was being watched. The thought made her uneasy, but she shook it off. She had survived hardships before, and she would survive this new life too. The next morning, the sun rose over the city in muted gold and soft pink. Adriana wandered through the small market near her building, absorbing the scents of fresh bread and herbs, the chatter of merchants and shoppers blending into a symphony of ordinary life. She tried to push thoughts of the man from last night from her mind, but they lingered stubbornly at the edge of her consciousness. It was in the quiet corner of a cafe that she saw him again. Matteo Romano sat alone, sipping coffee and reading a folder of papers. His presence was impossible to ignore. She felt her heart tighten in a way that startled her. There was no room for curiosity, no space for hesitation. Yet something in his quiet, commanding demeanor called to her, whispering of a story she wanted to know. As she stepped closer, Matteo's gaze lifted. Their eyes locked for a heartbeat that stretched into eternity. Adriana wanted to retreat, to protect herself from the intensity she did not understand. But something in his eyes softened ever so slightly, just enough for her to sense that beneath the armor, beneath the fearsome reputation, there might be a man capable of more than violence. The world of shadows and danger that Matteo inhabited was far from hers. Yet in that fleeting moment, Adriana felt a connection, fragile and tentative, that promised everything she had been searching for. She did not know then that their lives were about to collide in ways that would change them both forever. Chapter 2. A glimpse beneath the armor. Adriana could not shake the memory of Matteo Romano from her mind. The way he had looked at her yesterday, the quiet authority radiating from him. It lingered like a shadow she could not escape. She told herself it was foolish to think about a man she barely knew, a man whose reputation filled the city with fear. Yet her curiosity persisted, soft and insistent, whispering that there was more to him than anyone dared to see. The next morning, Adriana wandered through the small streets near her apartment, her eyes scanning the familiar corners and new faces, but she found herself scanning for him as well. She felt a strange, nervous anticipation, a mixture of apprehension and excitement. And then she noticed a commotion at the edge of the plaza. A man had collapsed, clutching his chest. A crowd gathered, shouting and gesturing. Without thinking, Adriana rushed forward, kneeling beside the man, checking his pulse. Her hands were steady despite the fear knotting her stomach. And then she felt a presence behind her, broad and commanding, and the world seemed to sharpen. Matteo Romano. His voice was low but steady. "Step back, Give me room." He knelt beside her with an ease that suggested experience. But there was no harshness, only a focused intensity. He examined the man quickly, checking for signs of life, then barked precise instructions at someone in the crowd. Adriana stepped back reluctantly, watching the shift in him. It was nothing like the stories she had heard. The beast she had imagined was not this careful, this controlled. There was a sharpness, yes, but also an unexpected tenderness in the way he handled the situation. The paramedics arrived, and Matteo stood to the side, his eyes scanning the scene until he was sure everything was in control. Adriana felt the pull of his gaze on her. There was a subtle acknowledgement there, a fleeting softness hidden beneath his vigilance. Her chest tightened at the realization that she was seeing something someone else in the city seemed allowed to see. She found herself walking beside him as the crowd dispersed. Words did not come easily, but she could feel the shift in the air, a fragile bridge forming between them. Matteo's jaw was still tense, his expression unreadable, yet in the way he moved, the way he glanced at her briefly, there was a trace of something human, something real that contradicted the fearsome persona. "I didn't expect anyone to step forward," he said finally, his voice a low rumble that made her pulse stutter. Adriana shrugged, forcing a casual smile she did not feel. "I couldn't just do nothing." For a long moment, they walked in silence. She studied the lines of his face, the intensity in his eyes, and the subtle way he softened when he thought no one was looking. She wondered what it took for a man like him to let anyone see past the walls he had built. She wanted to know, to reach behind the armor, but she did not yet know how or if it would be safe. By the time they parted, Adriana felt a quiet ache in her chest. She realized that beneath the legend of the beast, there was a man capable of depth, of care, and perhaps even of connection. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She could not deny the pull she felt toward him, a gentle but insistent tug that promised both danger and something she had not felt in a long time. Hope. As she watched him walk away, blending into the city that both shielded and defined him, Adriana understood that curiosity had turned into something more. She wanted to see him again, not just as the beast the city feared, but as the man glimpsed in that fleeting moment of vulnerability. Chapter 3. Unlikely proximity. Adriana had not expected to see Matteo again so soon, yet the city had a way of pulling them into the same spaces. She found herself at the local bookstore, a quiet refuge filled with the scent of paper and coffee, hoping to lose herself in stories rather than thoughts of him. She was examining a shelf of novels when a shadow fell across her line of sight. She looked up and froze. Matteo Romano stood there, hands tucked casually into his pockets, yet every inch of him radiated control and intensity. He scanned the store briefly before his gaze landed on her. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them. Adriana felt a rush of awareness, a tangle of fear and fascination. She wanted to turn away, to retreat into the safety of anonymity, but curiosity held her in place. Matteo took a careful step closer, but not too close, respecting boundaries even as he drew the air taut with tension. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said quietly, his voice measured and low. She swallowed, trying to steady her racing heart. "I come here sometimes. Books are safer than people." A flicker of something crossed his face, almost like amusement. "Safe isn't always what you think." They drifted through the aisles, side by side yet apart, both aware of the magnetic pull that refused to let them be indifferent. Adriana noticed the subtle ways he softened when he thought no one was watching, the slight relaxation of his shoulders, the way he tilted his head, scanning titles with curiosity rather than dominance. It was a glimpse of the man beneath the reputation, a sliver of humanity that was usually hidden from the world. Their conversation was tentative at first, punctuated by awkward pauses and careful words. Matteo asked questions that seemed ordinary on the surface, yet carried an undercurrent of interest and attention. Adriana found herself opening up, telling small stories about her past, her favorite authors, her dreams of finding a place where she belonged. She could feel him listening, truly listening, without judgment or condescension. When a sudden commotion outside drew attention, a car backfiring, Adriana flinched. Matteo instinctively moved closer, a subtle shield of presence that made her pulse flutter. It was a small gesture, almost imperceptible to anyone else, but to her it was profound. She realized in that moment that this man, feared and dangerous, was capable of gentleness, of protection that went beyond mere intimidation. By the time she left the bookstore, their paths had diverged again, but the pull remained. She could feel the memory of his gaze lingering on her, an invisible thread that promised more encounters, more revelations. Adriana's heart was conflicted, torn between caution and the undeniable thrill of proximity to someone so compelling. For Matteo, the meeting was equally charged. He had seen her courage, her curiosity, and the way she navigated the world with both determination and softness. It unsettled him, challenged him, and yet there was a part of him that wanted to know more, to see how far this unlikely connection could stretch. Neither of them spoke of the magnetism, the silent recognition that had begun between them, but both felt it as they walked away in opposite directions. The city around them continued its rhythm, oblivious to the subtle storm building in their lives. And though neither could yet predict it, their paths were already entwining, drawn together by a force neither had expected, by something more profound than fear or curiosity. Chapter 4. The first barrier. Adriana could no longer deny the pull Matteo Romano had on her, yet every heartbeat toward him came with an ache of caution. She had glimpsed a man beneath the beastly reputation, but the world he inhabited was dangerous. Unreality pressed relentlessly against her curiosity and attraction. The city seemed quieter that afternoon, but its silence held an unspoken warning. Adriana walked along the riverside path, thinking about the brief encounters with Matteo. Every smile he had offered, every subtle act of attentiveness lingered in her mind, but the shadows of his life clung to her thoughts like fog. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from a colleague about a small errand that would take her into the heart of Matteo's territory. Adriana hesitated. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to retreat to safety, but another part, the part that had always sought connection and challenge, pushed her forward. She had made promises to herself, promises to face life on her own terms. As she approached the square where Matteo often lingered, she saw him. He was waiting, leaning against the familiar black car, his expression unreadable. When their eyes met, her stomach tightened. She wanted to step back, but her feet refused to move. "Adriana," he said, his voice low, almost cautious, "this area isn't safe for someone like you." Her heart fluttered, caught between fear and something else, something tender that she could not name. "I can take care of myself," she replied, trying to sound confident, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. He studied her for a long moment, and she noticed the subtle tension in his shoulders. Matteo Romano, the beast the city feared, was showing hesitation, concern, something that spoke of boundaries and care. "It's not just the streets," he said finally. "It's my world. It's complicated, and it's dangerous." Adriana's chest ached at the truth of his words. She had imagined danger in abstract terms, but hearing it from him, feeling the weight in his tone, made it tangible. Love, or even connection, seemed impossible here, yet the pull between them was undeniable, and she could not ignore it. "I'm not afraid," she said softly, more to herself than to him. I want to understand." Matteo's eyes softened for the briefest instant. "Understanding can hurt," he said, almost a warning, almost a confession. His gaze flicked toward the street, scanning for unseen threats, before returning to her. "Are you ready for that?" Adriana swallowed hard. She knew she was not just confronting him, but the shadows that followed him everywhere. To reach him, to reach past the beast, she would need courage she had not yet measured in herself. And still, a part of her whispered that the risk might be worth it. As she stepped closer, she felt the first barrier between them, the invisible boundary of his life and power, the danger that came with proximity. Yet in that tension, in that fragile hesitation, there was also a promise that, perhaps, beneath the beast, There was a man who could be touched by care, by trust, by something as simple and fragile as love. Adriana knew then that nothing about Matteo or his world would be easy, but she also knew that her heart had already started walking toward him, even if her mind tried to pull her back. Chapter 5. Small merciless days that followed their tense encounter left Adriana restless. She could not stop thinking about Matteo Romano, the man whose reputation loomed over the city a shadow, and yet whose presence stirred something unexpected within her. She had glimpsed his softer side, fleeting and almost imperceptible, and she clung to that memory like a lifeline. Their paths crossed again at a small cafe near her apartment. Adriana had arrived early, hoping to savor her morning coffee in peace. She was arranging her papers when a shadow fell across the table. She looked up and found Matteo, watching her, calm but undeniably commanding. He held a steaming cup in one hand, and without asking, placed it in front of her. "You looked like you needed this," he said quietly. The gesture was small, almost ordinary, yet it carried a weight that made her chest tighten. Adriana blinked, unsure what to say. She had not expected kindness from someone like him, at least not in such an intimate, unassuming way. "Thank you," she murmured, her fingers brushing the rim of the cup. The warmth of it seemed to seep into her hands, a quiet comfort amidst the tension she always felt around him. They fell into a tentative rhythm of conversation, their words cautious but genuine. Matteo asked about her day, her routines, even her favorite books. Adriana found herself sharing more than she intended, drawn out by the rare softness she sensed beneath his otherwise controlled exterior. There were no threats, no demands, just small gestures that hinted at a side of him few ever saw. When they left the cafe, Matteo guided her along the crowded streets, subtly positioning himself between her and the passing traffic. His protective instinct was quiet, almost imperceptible, but it made her feel safer than she had in years. She caught herself stealing glances at him, noticing the slight tension in his jaw as he scanned the streets, the careful calculation in his eyes, and the way his posture softened ever so slightly when he thought no one was watching. For Adriana, these small mercies were a revelation. The beast she had imagined was not a creature of pure brutality. Beneath the layers of reputation and fear, there was a man capable of tenderness, of attentiveness that did not demand or intimidate, but simply existed. And in that realization, her heart began to hope, fragile and tentative, that she could bridge the gap between their worlds. Yet the shadow of his life remained, an ever-present reminder of danger and uncertainty. Adriana knew that every moment of warmth came with risk, every smile with unspoken consequences. Still, the pull between them was undeniable, a magnetic force she could not resist. By the time they parted, Adriana's fingers still tingled from the warmth of the cup, from the proximity to a man who was both terrifying and magnetic. Matteo's eyes lingered on her for a heartbeat longer than necessary, a silent acknowledgement of the connection forming between them. She walked back to her apartment with a flutter of hope and a deep, gnawing awareness that her life was becoming entwined with someone whose world she barely understood. And somewhere beneath his calculated exterior, Matteo felt it too, the quiet stirrings of something he had long suppressed. He did not yet know what to call it, but for the first time in a long while, the beast felt a pull toward softness, toward someone who could see him not just as a force to be reckoned with, but as a man capable of more. Chapter 6. Danger strikes. Adriana had grown accustomed to the uneasy rhythm of the city, but nothing could have prepared her for the sudden chaos that erupted one late evening. She was walking home from the market, a small bag of groceries in her hand, when a black van screeched around the corner. Shouts and the harsh echo of gunfire shattered the quiet streets. Heart racing, Adriana ducked behind a stack of crates, her breath catching in her throat. The world seemed to tilt, fear sharpening every sound and shadow. She knew, deep down, that she had wandered too close to Matteo's world. Every instinct screamed for her to run, but her legs felt frozen, caught between terror and the realization that there was no safe path out. Then he appeared, Matteo Romano. He moved with lethal precision, every step controlled, every motion decisive. Adriana barely had time to process the sight of him, trialing threats with swift, calculated efficiency. And yet, even in the midst of danger, there was something in the way he glanced toward her, a silent promise that he would not let anything happen to her. Her pulse surged as he reached her side, crouching low. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice firm but calm. Adriana obeyed, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the edge of his jacket. She felt his warmth, his presence, and in that moment, fear mingled with a strange, inexplicable comfort. The minutes stretched like hours as the threat passed, leaving the streets eerily silent. Matteo scanned the area once more before turning his full attention to her. His eyes, dark and intense, softened slightly as he noted her shaken state. "You're safe," he said quietly, though the tension in his jaw betrayed his concern. "Do you understand? I will not let anyone hurt you." Adriana's chest heaved with relief and fear. She realized then that the pull she felt toward him had shifted. It was no longer curiosity or fascination. It was something deeper, tethered to vulnerability, trust, and a fledgling dependence she had not intended to feel. I'm okay," she murmured, though her voice wavered. Matteo's gaze lingered, studying her as if trying to measure the fragility and strength coexisting within her. For a moment, the beast was gone, replaced by a man whose protective instincts were raw, undeniable, and deeply personal. The tension between them stretched taut, filled with unspoken acknowledgement that the world outside might be dangerous. But here, in this fleeting bubble, there was a connection that defied fear. When the chaos finally receded and Adriana walked toward her apartment, she felt her heartbeat slow, though her hands still shook. The encounter had terrified her, yet it had also revealed something she could not ignore. Matteo Romano was not just a figure of fear. He was a man who could become a shield, a presence whose attention and care could carve safety out of chaos. And somewhere beneath the calm, controlled exterior, Matteo felt it too. He had confronted danger countless times, but seeing her in harm's way ignited something he could not ignore. The beast who ruled with fear and authority had softened, if only slightly, for the woman who had dared to step into his world. Adriana would never forget this night, neither would he. Chapter 7. Confessions in the Dark City was quiet, but Adriana could not sleep. The events of the previous night played over and over in her mind: the sudden danger, Matteo's fierce protection, the way his presence had grounded her even as her heart raced. She felt exposed, raw, and strangely alive. A soft knock at her apartment door made her start. Before she could react, Matteo was there, his silhouette framed by the dim hallway light. His eyes, usually sharp and unreadable, were heavy with concern. The tension between them shifted, fragile and intimate. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. His voice lacked its usual authority, softened by the vulnerability he rarely allowed anyone to see. Adriana hesitated only a moment before stepping aside. He entered, and the faint scent of him that in the room, a mix of leather, rain, and something indefinably personal. The closeness made her pulse quicken, but she did not step back. She wanted this, even if fear whispered against it. They sat on opposite ends of her sofa, a careful distance, yet every movement carried weight. Matteo's gaze lingered on her, searching, weighing, trying to measure the courage and tenderness he saw in her. "I shouldn't have let you get that close," he admitted finally, voice low and rough around the edges. "It's dangerous, my world. It isn't meant for someone like you." Adriana's hands tightened in her lap. She had feared this moment, the pull of honesty that could push her away. Yet she could not hide her own truth. "I'm not afraid of you, Matteo. Not anymore. I want to understand. I want to know you." He closed his eyes briefly, a breath slipping through him, if it carried years of restraint and burden. "Understanding comes with pain," he said softly. "I've done things, terrible things. I've hurt people I cared about, and I've protected people in ways that others would never understand. I've built walls to keep everyone out, even you." Adriana felt her chest ache at the admission, the raw honesty behind the words. I don't care about your walls, she whispered. I care about you. Not the beast the city fears. Not the enforcer everyone talks about. You. The man I saw when you protected me. For a moment, Matteo's eyes glistened, a faint shadow of vulnerability breaking through his controlled exterior. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, voice barely audible. You don't know what you're asking for. You're asking to be part of my life, knowing it could destroy you. I'm willing to risk it, she said. Her voice steady despite the tremor of emotion in her chest. I want to be here, Matteo, with you. The tension between them shifted from fear to intimacy, fragile but undeniable. He reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face with the gentlest of gestures. It was a touch that spoke of care, protection, and something deeper that words could not capture. They sat together in silence, sharing the weight of unspoken fears and tentative hopes. For the first time, Matteo allowed himself to consider that someone could see beyond the beast, beyond the danger, and still choose to stay. And Adriana realized that love, trust, and vulnerability were not weaknesses. They were courage of the highest kind. That night, the city outside continued its rhythm, but inside the small apartment, two hearts edged closer together, bridging the gap between fear and desire, between danger and tenderness. Confessions had been made, walls had begun to crumble, and the first true threads of trust and love had begun to weave between them. Chapter 8. Rival threats. Adriana had begun to feel a fragile sense of stability in her life, but the city had other plans. Rumors had begun to circulate, whispers of Matteo's enemies taking notice of her presence. The subtle shifts in familiar streets, the cautious glances from strangers, and the faint hum of danger in the air reminded her that the world Matteo inhabited was never far from peril. She felt it first on her way home from the market. A sleek black car trailed a few blocks behind, moving slowly, almost deliberately. Her pulse quickened as she ducked into a narrow alley, trying to lose them. But the sense of being watched persisted. She realized with a jolt that this threat was no accident. She was in Matteo's world now, whether she liked it or not. By the time she reached her apartment, Matteo was already there, leaning against the wall in a casual posture that betrayed none of the tension she felt. But his eyes told a different story, sharp, alert, and burning with protective fire. They've noticed you, he said without preamble, voice low but tense. You don't belong in their sights, Adriana. This is my responsibility, not yours. Adriana shook her head, frustration and fear mingling. I can't just disappear from my own life. I won't let you shoulder everything alone. Matteo stepped closer, closing the distance between them, his presence overwhelming and grounding all at once. You don't understand. One misstep, one glance, and they could hurt you, or worse. I won't allow it. His tone was fierce, unwavering. In that moment, the beast everyone feared was fully revealed, not in cruelty, but in the raw intensity of care. She searched his eyes, finding the subtle traces of vulnerability he tried so hard to mask. I'm not afraid, she said softly, though her voice wavered. I'm with you. I'll face it, whatever comes. Matteo's jaw tightened, and for a long moment he said nothing. Then, slowly, he reached out, brushing a lock of hair from her face, his touch tender, yet possessive. You are brave, Adriana, he murmured, almost to himself, and reckless, but I can't ignore that you're mine to protect. That night, they planned together, mapping routes and identifying safe places, small gestures of strategy and caution that revealed the depth of Matteo's world and the lengths he would go to shield her. Adriana felt the weight of fear and the spark of trust intertwining. She realized that being close to Matteo meant facing danger head-on, but it also meant experiencing a connection she had never known, intense, protective, and unwavering. As she lay awake, the city humming outside, she understood the stakes. Love in Matteo's world was never easy. Every tender moment came with risk, every smile with responsibility, and yet she had chosen to stay. Somewhere in the shadows, Matteo watched over her, his mind restless. The beast he had been for so long was shifting, softened by the woman who dared to step into his life. Her courage stirred something in him he had long thought dormant, a fierce need to protect, to shield, and perhaps, quietly, to love without fear. Adriana's heartbeat mirrored his own, steadying and quickening in turn, bound by trust, danger, and the undeniable pull that drew them closer with each passing day. Chapter 9. Heart over Firth city streets were quiet, but the tension in Adriana's chest was anything but. Rumors had escalated into action. Matteo's enemies were no longer content to simply watch. They were testing boundaries, pushing closer to her world. She had felt their presence before, but now the danger was palpable, immediate, and terrifying. Yet as fear tightened around her, Adriana felt something stronger. She had made a choice. She would not run. She would not hide. She would face whatever came. Because to step back now would mean letting fear dictate her life, and she had already given her heart to a man who demanded courage. Matteo arrived at her apartment without warning, his expression unreadable, but his eyes blazing with intensity. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice low, though his tone was edged with something deeper than anger. "It's too dangerous, I know," Adriana replied, standing her ground, heart hammering. "But I'm not leaving, not now, not ever." The words hung between them, fragile yet resolute. Matteo stepped closer, every movement controlled, precise, and undeniably protective. His gaze searched hers, reading the determination in her eyes, the courage she had cultivated in the face of his dangerous world. "You're reckless," he said finally, though the edge of vulnerability beneath his stern exterior softened the words. "And yet, I can't stop you. I won't let anything happen to you." The city seemed to fade around them, leaving only the tension and connection that had grown over weeks of stolen moments, small mercies, and quiet understanding. Adriana reached for his hand, feeling the warmth, the strength, the protective force that had become a constant in her life. "Then let's face it together," she said, voice steady despite the tremor of fear beneath it. From Matteo, the admission struck deeper than he expected. He had spent years building walls of fear and control, but this woman, this fearless, determined, tender woman, had broken through them. Her bravery challenged him, softened him, and ignited something in his chest he had long suppressed: hope, trust, and love. The days that followed were a careful dance between danger and defiance. Together, they navigated threats, each step strengthening their bond. Adriana learned to read Matteo's subtle cues, the way his protective instincts flared when a shadow loomed, the way his eyes softened when he believed she was safe. She realized that fear could exist alongside love, that danger did not have to separate them, and that trust was a force more powerful than intimidation. One evening, as they surveyed the city from a rooftop, Matteo's arm wrapped around her shoulders. She felt the full weight of their journey. The night wind tugged at her hair, carrying the scent of rain and asphalt, and the city lights flickered below like 1,000 tiny promises. "You've changed me," he murmured, voice low and intimate, almost lost to the wind. "I've lived in shadows for so long, but you've made me want more, to be more, and I'm terrified of failing you." Adriana pressed closer to him, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. "You won't fail," she said softly. "We face this together. Whatever comes, we face it as one." In that moment, the boundaries between fear and love blurred. The beast who had roared with intimidation and cold authority now stood transformed, softened by the courage of the woman beside him. And Adriana knew, with a certainty that steadied her entire being, that love, fierce, fearless, and unwavering, could conquer even the shadows that surrounded them. Chapter 10. A beast transformed. City was calm, almost serene, a stark contrast to the chaos that had marked the weeks before. Adriana walked beside Matteo, hand in hand, feeling the quiet strength of his presence beside her. The tension that had haunted their every step had eased, replaced by a fragile peace that they had fought to earn. Matteo glanced at her, his dark eyes softened by an openness he had rarely allowed himself to show. "We made it," he said quietly, almost in disbelief. "Through everything. We made it." Adriana smiled, squeezing his hand. "We did. Together. It was not a naive peace. Danger still lingered in the city's shadows, and Matteo's life remained intertwined with forces she could never fully escape. But the fear that had once threatened to drive them apart had been replaced by trust, courage, and a bond forged through shared trials. For Matteo, the transformation was profound. He had been the beast, the feared enforcer, whose name alone inspired respect and caution. Yet now, standing beside Adriana, he felt the weight of power shift into something softer, something warmer. He had discovered that strength was not only in control and fear, but in tenderness, protection, and the willingness to let someone see the man beneath the legend. Adriana looked up at him, her eyes reflecting both love and awe. "You've changed," she whispered. "Not just for me, for yourself." He smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached his eyes and softened his features. "You taught me that," he admitted. "You showed me that I can be more than what the world expects, that I can love and be loved without hiding behind walls." They walked through the city streets, the night air cool against their skin. Each step was a quiet affirmation of what they had built together, a life shaped by choice, courage, and unwavering trust. Adriana felt the rhythm of their bond in every touch, every glance, every heartbeat. Eventually, they reached a small park, the lights casting a golden glow over the paths and benches. Matteo stopped and turned toward her, his hands holding hers with gentle certainty. "I don't know what the future holds," he said softly, "but I know that I want it with you. Every challenge, every quiet moment, I want you there." Adriana's heart swelled. She had risked everything to be here, to stand by him, to see beyond the beast. Now, in the quiet of the night, she realized that every fear, every hesitation, had led to this moment. "And I want it with you," she said, her voice steady and filled with warmth. Matteo pulled her into his arms, holding her close as if anchoring himself to the only thing that truly mattered. The city stretched out around them, indifferent to their small world, but they needed nothing else. In that embrace, the beast was gone, replaced by a man capable of love, tenderness, and devotion. For the first time in years, Matteo Romano felt whole, and Adriana Moretti knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together, hearts aligned, love unshaken, and a bond that had transformed both of them forever. As they stood beneath the city lights, hand in hand, a soft smile lingered on their lips. The shadows of the past had been conquered, and a new chapter of hope, trust, and unwavering love had begun.